Mirë se vini përsëri në emisionin ton tash e tutje. Për ndryshim nga emisionet e kaluara, sot në studion ton do të kemi dy mysafirë. Me mysafirët tanë do të bisedojmë për çështjen e vizave në rajonin e Ballkanit perëndimor, pastaj gradualisht do të bresim për çështjen e vizave për Kosovën dhe nëse do ta mbetet kohë për dialogun, temën më të nxehtë aktualisht të Ballkanit, dialogun midis Serbisë dhe Kosovës. Dhe për këtë tema unë kam ftuar në studio dy mysafirë tanë. Në krahun tim të gjatë kam zonjën Tanja Fajon. Welcome at our debate. Dhe ambasadorin e Kosovës, zotrin Ilir Dugolli. I will go immediately introducing the subjects. You are the reporter of the European Parliament for visa liberalization for Kosovo. But before going directly into the issue, I will ask your interpretation of the latest figures from United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, which say that there is an increase of around 25% of asylum seekers from the region into European Union, including the non-European countries, 38 of them. And these figures say that in 2011 there were 32,000 asylum seekers from the region, and then a jump for 12,489, or a total 44,700 from last year. I will ask your opinion, your interpretation. What does these figures say about the situation in the region, and as well about the mood inside EU countries about the newcomers or the people vulnerable who are seeking refuge inside the EU?
Thank you. The numbers by itself, of course, tell us a lot. That people obviously need to travel, they need to find a better opportunity, that obviously they don't have a safe environment at home to go abroad to find a job, to find security. We saw an enormous increase of asylum seekers coming from the Western Balkans, especially from Macedonia and Serbia. Only last year, more than 60% of people in the comparison with the year before asked for the asylum. They normally travel to the countries which have a friendly asylum system, to Germany, to Sweden, to Belgium, to Luxembourg, where they can stay much longer periods, when they can get some benefits from the system, like a daily allowance and maybe a shelter, and only after half a year they can travel home. It is a very sensitive issue, what is happening, and we try to approach in the European Parliament to be very cautious when we discuss with the member states. Of course, there is a huge pressure from the member states to reintroduce visas for one or two countries of the Western Balkans, especially because the atmosphere today in Europe is very negative when we talk about the freedom of movement, the arrival of immigrants, and the job seekers finally, because we don't have enough job opportunities for our European citizens. But nevertheless, I do hope that this region, when we talk about 5 countries of the Western Balkans which are today in visa-free regime, would never be again in the situation when citizens will have to need visas to travel.
But you are coming from an EU member already, from the region as well. We are very familiar. How does the citizens in your country, as well the citizens in EU, interpret these figures? Does the EU countries are becoming less hospitable to the people from the region? Is there hospitality still inside the EU for the vulnerable people?
Certainly, we face today more anger and more negative sentiments towards the immigrants or towards the people who search jobs. This is as well the reason that we in Europe face much more nationalistic feelings, many new extreme right even entering the government, so the whole atmosphere is negative to new arrivals. In Slovenia, I would say we maybe see the situation different because we used to be part of old Yugoslavia, so we had a lot of family relatives, a lot of friendly relations. But but still this number, which is so high, of the asylum seekers is very alarming. What was a good practice, Austria, Belgium or Luxembourg, I think they established the short asylum procedures for the asylum seekers from the Western Balkan. They reduced the procedures, so they put countries on the list of countries of safe origin. And this has helped significantly. The number reduced of asylum seekers in these countries.
These restrictive measures, receiving them, sending them 2 days after or 3 days after back home, doesn't resolve the problem.
But you have to understand that people are not, in most of the cases, allowed or not allowed, they are not entitled to get the asylum for political or economic reasons. Only 1% maybe of asylum seekers really get the asylum finally. So when you look at the countries of the region of the Western Balkan, they are in one or another way in the European integration process. They are fulfilling certain reforms, they are assuring certain level of human rights respect. And all this situation, you have to know that visa liberalization didn't mean that you can ask for the job or for the citizenship.
Mrs. Fayan was speaking about the vulnerable situation of the asylum seekers from the region to the EU. You are new ambassador from Kosovo here. Kosovo is already 5 years independent. Regardless of the past, how do you explain the fact that the number of Kosovar citizens seeking the asylum inside the EU was so high in 2011, around nearly 10,000, and it's almost the same number for the past year? What's happening? Why does people from the region, they just want to leave the country and live inside the EU?
I think it's always difficult to answer such questions, but part of the answer may be also in your last part of the sentence, or the questions that why do people of the region? You mentioned that this is not only an issue about Kosovo, but it is of the region. And we have a phenomenon that is going on across the region, so in other countries as well. And it's not only limited to Kosovo. But of course, what we have to do and what we must focus is to really improve circumstances as much as possible in Kosovo. Our institutions, our citizens, and when I speak of institutions, I mean every segment of society, really have to do much more.
Do what exactly? Much more?
You have to ask first individual citizens why they are leaving in order to improve their circumstances. The reasons are manifold, they are different, they are economic of course. So we have to improve the economic situation, there is no doubt about that. I mean, most of those who really seek nowadays do that, who seek asylum, who seek protection, they do it for economic reasons. But they may be, of course, individual cases, and we cannot prejudge. They may be individual cases here and there for other reasons, and then it's up to authorities of a certain country, receiving country, to decide and to judge based on its own legislation and legal instruments whether that is justified or not. But we have to do, of course, things of that nature, so to improve the circumstances, to improve the perspective, to improve the opportunities for citizens. These are certainly things that cannot be done within a day. These are things that cannot be done easily, but once you see perspective, once you see improvement, once you see hope in being in your country and developing your future there, going maybe to study and to work and to build business, but at the same time having an opportunity to go back, that all influences. But at the same time, it wouldn't be fair if I don't add that really the fact of being isolated also increases this motive to go and to see whether the grass is really greener on the other side of the fence or not, because you have not traveled. If you are a young person or even some mid-aged and they only hear what is going on, they consider these countries with endless opportunities and perspectives. They don't know all the difficulties, the hurdles that go around even in these countries that you live now for years.
In other words, there is job either by governments of the region, including Kosovo government, as well from the EU member countries, to inform that EU is not anymore a heaven, or if it has ever been a good heaven for citizens.
It's a very good point the ambassador mentioned.
Yes.
People simply being so isolated. Of course, when you are forbidden to do something, it's sometimes much more tempted to see what's behind the fence. Yeah. But of course, certainly it's an economic reason. It's a huge unemployment in Kosovo. It's a difficult situation for young generation as well to live. And we human beings, I don't believe that we are made just to travel and go around. We always like to go back home. Yes. I think it's in our nature. Either we are forced to go to find better opportunities for life. I don't think that we would just like to change our homeland for good to stay somewhere abroad. Normally, all these immigration flows we are following in Europe, coming from third countries, either the reason is economy, situation, poverty, climate, wars, violence. People normally don't go for a longer period simply because they would love to be somewhere else. We like as human beings to stay at home.
How serious are these numbers in terms of how can they affect, in fact, the scream of some countries to reintroduce the visas? Those are quite serious. There is an increase of 25%.
You can always discuss from different angles. I would say if you look at the broader context of people arriving to Europe, numbers are not serious. Okay. For people coming from the Western Balkan. In the past, we were able to face that kind of situations. After the wars, we had a feeling of solidarity in Europe, which was much bigger than today. But what is today is that we had as well a revolution in Middle East. A lot of people came as well from this part of the world to Europe, and all this, and then you have a financial and economic crisis. You had a moral and social crisis in Europe when people are jobless, when young generation don't have a vision, and all this, of course, creates an atmosphere that it's very difficult to accept new people and give them jobs and feel the same solidarity. And this is a very sensitive moment.
But despite this, if I'm not getting you wrong, you are saying that the 6 countries, Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, France, Luxembourg and Sweden, they are not going far. They are to maintain the visa-free regime.
At the moment, they don't have a mechanism to reintroduce visas. At the moment, we don't have a system through which they can impose visas back to the Western Balkan, only by changing the whole legislation, which would take at least another 2 years. The immediate mechanism could be the temporary suspension of visa-free regime, but we are only negotiating that, and we are negotiating since more than a year, and at the moment we are in some black hole. I don't know how fast we will come to this mechanism, but the pressure from the member states such as Germany, you mentioned, or Sweden, is surely growing. So it's growing as well on our institution. We are negotiating about that mechanism I mentioned. And if this year we will adopt it, I suppose we will have to, because it concerns all third countries which are in visa-free regime, not only the Western Balkan, then there is an immediate danger that some member states, as Germany or as France or some other, can ask introduction of visas for one or another countries of the Western Balkans.
Does this situation you are speaking, especially Germany and Sweden, we cannot perhaps exclude the other 4, helps Kosovo accelerating the visa-free regime?
Certainly not, but I would always say, everything you have to do in this visa dialogue, it actually helps to the institutions on the ground. So you should not blame either the crisis in Europe, either the political sentiments or nationalistic sentiments in European countries towards the immigrants or asylum seekers, but you have better to focus on what you have to do at home. Because finally, on the roadmap. And here Kosovo, to be very frank, has to do still a lot of steps. It will be a long process, and it's not helpful to discuss when it will finish. But what I can assure you that we are really trying to be very helpful in this process.
The visa roadmap was presented to Kosovo by the European Commission only in June last year. There has been a first assessment earlier this year by the Commission. What's your assessment? Is Kosovo doing enough on fulfilling, meeting these benchmarks?
It's never enough. You should never be satisfied.
There's no perfect world, if I can say.
You should never be satisfied as long as everything has not been achieved. But the report from February from the Commission, it was rather a positive one. There are frameworks established for what is necessary: border security, document security, fight against corruption and organized crime. A set of recommendations has been made from the European Commission. What Kosovo still has to do. Different pieces of legislation. I wouldn't like to go into details because it's a very technical, and the Commission is dealing with Kosovo authorities. But certainly one is you can adopt things on the paper, but then you have to assure it works in practice. And here I think it's still quite a gap. And here Kosovo has to do still further efforts. I think it will be a process which will take some time. Surely the present situation is not very helpful for Kosovo, but on the other hand we have to know that Kosovo is really the only black hole. And we are here discussing about the freedom of movement, which is the basic human rights. And I hope this will prevail when we will be taking as well political decisions in each further steps to really help Kosovo in that way.
Mr. Ambassador, the Deputy Fajan is saying that Kosovo has to focus on implementation of the roadmap. Yeah, there are 94, 96 points, if I'm not wrong. But Kosovo government, especially the Prime Minister and Minister of Interior, have been saying just recently that they feel betrayed by the EU. They have been, if I'm not wrong, expecting an early decision on visa liberalization for Kosovo. Can you explain a little bit the position of the Kosovo government towards what the European Commission is saying?
Well, of course, I can try and do my best to my knowledge, but in full honesty, I will never try to explain individual statements of one institution or the other, because they were at times different statements from different institutions, and the best way is of course to ask all them individually what they may mean at one given time or the other. A certain sense of disappointment that is present, and I don't think that that is present only with institutions, that is present with citizens first and foremost. And that is what for me is the most important, to be very honest. I mean, with all due respect to all institutions, but at the end of the day, us as officials, we can move, we can get a visa easier and so on, but what the problem is for those ordinary citizens who cannot obtain a visa, or who are refused, or who then in hope of going and finding some futures anywhere in the world are ready even to pay who knows, I mean, all the fortune just to end up somewhere refused and then return back to their home country. So this sort of disappointment from time to time, yes, it does exist. I mean, I sense it when talking to people. But should that discourage us? Absolutely not. I mean, there was a certain disappointment also when it took so long to have a roadmap as such. But we need to fight, we need to ask, we need to demand to raise that, and with very helpful individuals and institutions like the one where we are sitting today at the Parliament, or the Commission as well, and member countries, we try really to make this process as faster as possible. We have a roadmap, so we work on fulfilling the conditions, and this is the best way to do it. I mean, you have a tool, you have benchmarks that you can judge based on, but we have that less than a year ago. I mean, it would have been, of course, much better if we had such a document much before. Now, assessments are going on. We have had in February the second senior officials meeting and the first written assessment done. And as frequently as possible, these assessments can be done, the better, because then you make it very clear what has been done and what has not been done. And statements of individual disappointment, of political gains or points and so on become less relevant, because media, civil society, individuals as a whole can see what has been delivered and what not from institutions, and in such a way make more pressure towards all, towards us, towards us diplomats, towards government, towards European Commission and member states and so on and so forth. So that's the only way to go about, in my humble opinion.
Deputy Fajan, most of the countries, for most of the countries for religion, it took around 1 year of negotiating, at least. Longer. At least 1 year. Now, how long it could take to Kosovo, especially when it comes to one of the most important chapters, the rule of law, corruption and organized crime? It's a quite important demand that the Commission is pointing out at the benchmarks.
It is everything what I would say how long it will take would be from my side wrong to do. It very much depends how quickly the process will go on. It's a certain a technical process which the government has to go through to establish what is necessary in the dialogue with European Commission. I do hope, I mean, in the case of the other countries, the process has been at least a year, two, I would say even longer, going through the criteria from different blocks of roadmap the Commission established. So it depends on the commitments. On the other hand as well, I would say quite often, to be frank, it's a political decision at the end. We can do very smoothly the technical process. It's not encouraging, but that's why I say let's stick to what is necessary to do, because then we have, even here, we are in the same process as the Council, as the Member States. If we have the arguments that the technical process has been fulfilled, then it's much easier to do the pressure, to force. It was the same case when we were deciding about Bosnia and Albania. At the end, we will have to come with the arguments, have the estimation of the Commission that the process is done, that everything has been assured, and then I think we will have arguments to fight for it. And honestly, I feel at least this institution, European Parliament, has been always a great supporter for the enlargement and for visa-free regime. I do expect that we will still be in the future like that. And we are helping Kosovo as much as possible, but talking now about the dates is creating as well some wrong expectations in the region. And often in the past it proved as well when the media speculated with the dates, or the ministers, due to political gaining points or so, tried to say we did everything from our side. It is not helpful. Let us focus on the work, try to do it, and I do expect that that political will. I agree that was a big disappointment. It was disappointment as well in the Parliament. We several times wrote in the past letters with my colleagues to the Commission, start the dialogue, because we could feel that it was a political decision. And I can just reassure you that we will continue making that pressure. More than that, it's in the hands of the government as well in Kosovo.
We are running out of the time, another 5 or 6 minutes. I'll go back to Ambassador Dugoli. The issue of the dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia is becoming one of the most burning issues, political issues in the region. What the Kosovo expects from this dialogue, if there is a deal?
Well, I hope and believe that what Kosovo expects is what High Representative, as facilitator of this process, has announced, that is normalization of relations between Kosovo and Serbia. This is a must. But I really hope that there is going to be a very clear set of criteria of what amounts to normalization, because we would not like to have some sort of ticking off several boxes and to leave a big, huge PR impression that there is deal on one thing or the other. And yet to stagnate with the same relation where Serbia basically blocks Kosovo internationally and then does everything to undermine it internally in part of the territory of Kosovo. So we want this paradigm to change in order for them to focus on so many issues that they have to deal with in their own society, and us to be able to, enter international organizations, to have access to international organizations, and to, of course, stop their pretension of treating Kosovo as part of Serbia. So I really believe that there can be no shortcut. This is most probably a very long-term process until it reaches that point. But at the same time, we should not pretend that simply if one agreement is reached next week or in 2 weeks or whenever, that would amount to normalization of relation. I think that that would be a huge blow and very risky because there is a need to have constant attention towards Serbia so that it does not block Kosovo and so that eventually it recognizes Kosovo and we have normal relations as two countries moving towards EU. This is the way that I see it, but it's at the end of the day my personal view.
Mrs. Fajon, Kosovo government has been calling on the EU, Serbia as well, to be a kind of guarantor of the whatever is agreed between the two countries. Should that happen? Should EU guarantee the implementation? Because Ambassador de Gaulle is expressing some concerns. What in terms of implementation, and what in terms of normalization relation, if Prime Minister agree on anything?
I would first of all say that my feeling is that Lady Ashton really devotes a lot of energy in the process as such, and as well the institutions, which really want to help both sides to find a solution for northern part of Kosovo. I think what Ambassador said, it's for me the most important as well, that we bear in mind the life of citizens there, to facilitate their life and to ensure that they can normally live there, and to find a solution which would be acceptable for both sides.
Everybody is saying that what both sides negotiating and EU's office, Ashton's office, that the dialogue is meant for the better life of citizens. But Pristina and Belgrade are deeply divided. What does it mean? How these kind of proposals, platforms or plans can ameliorate the life of citizens in Kosovo and Serbia? My question goes directly to you. Just to remind you that there are two my former invitees of the debate, Mr. Bernd Postel and Doris Pack, who are against Serbia's plan or platform to create an autonomy inside Kosovo for Serb municipalities. What do you think about the Serbian proposal?
I absolutely don't feel that it's in my capacity to comment the details of the negotiations. First of all, I'm not even part of it. Secondly, I can read from the media and I can be briefed with the colleagues from the institution. I would just encourage, and I'm happy to see that both governments and both prime ministers are, to my understanding, very much committed to the process. There has been some positive results, but what is important for me is as well that the outcome of this would be that before the summer, Kosovo will sign some contractual relations with the European Union. That means a stabilization, association agreement, and that I think it's important to have in mind. To have a further progress on the path towards the European integration, to open the perspectives for the citizens, to find common solutions which will facilitate to both sides. Finally, this is the question about the neighboring states. In the region, wherever we look, we had bad experiences, we have learned a lot of lessons, but I think that our common understanding should be the European integration, which would most probably abolish a lot of problems we have in the region. But of course, it's a long process, and it will not be solved over maybe coming next years.
One last question. When do you see Western Balkans and Kosovo after 10 years? If I may ask a fair prognosis.
I wish to see being part of European Union, sincerely, because I think if we don't take this responsibility and credibility on our side to integrate Western Balkan in European Union and make Europe stronger to outside world, then we will be weaker and we risk that we will lose the region. And this risk, I'm afraid, when watching today either politicians or government in the region, how they are behaving, or the young generations, which they don't have clear perspectives, not even European perspectives, and they are losing this idea of why it is important that we go on to have some common European future. We are facing as well the same problem among European citizens today. So it's overall, if I would say, we are in a very sensitive moment, as well when we discuss the whole European project.
Speaking about the Kosovo's future, there are 5 countries who are not recognizing Kosovo, and they are kind of a block situation, even for SSA agreement, even for visa liberalization.
I think even here we can, in the future, expect some changes. If I now remain optimistic for the end of our discussion, I do expect some positive changes, yes.
Mr. Ambassador, you have quite a good supporter here.
We are lucky to have supporters like Tanya, of course, so many other MEPs. We are very happy, and we of course try to keep that alive, to nourish that support, and we need to give them as much arguments as possible. And the best way to keep their support alive is of course to do more, to continue working, and to make them proud of this joint project. So let's hope that we can continue doing that, and I can only echo what...
What's your prognosis? What would Kosovo be after 10 years?
As I said, I can echo what she said, that kind of ambitious, very ambitious goal. We need to be, of course, ambitious. It's difficult to set. I'm not a politician, so I don't have to really make big statements of where we will be in 2, 3 years or 10 years. But we try to do our best, and let's hope we will be irreversibly anchored into EU integration process, recognized by all, including by our neighbor, who still has difficulties with our existence as a country. So this would be really a must, but I emphasize this also being anchored, because now, as Tanya mentioned, we are very much looking forward to see how will EU as a whole behave towards starting of negotiations for SAA with Kosovo, and we will reach at some point this moment of truth where we will have to contractually engage and sign that. So it's a big issue for us. So let's hope that it won't take us too long, so that then we will really be in a much better situation in the 10 years, as we are saying, maybe if not 10, very close. I would hope, I would love to see that, but difficult to speculate.
Our 30 minutes are over. Ms. Tanya Fajon, thanks for coming.
Thank you very much for inviting
Mr.
me.
Dugolli, thanks for coming too.
A pleasure, thank you.